I'm Jack the Agnostic Garcia, and on today's program, we're examining magic, religion, and spirituality in ancient Babylon. All right, let's get started with the origins of Mesopotamia. Well, Mesopotamia is the heart and soul of the Middle East. The Tigris and Euphrates River give life to the region, and it is known as the cradle of civilization. Well, the area is first settled circa 5000 BC by a culture known as the Ubaidians. Now, the Ubaidians are a civilizing force in the region. They drain the marshes, begin agriculture and trade. Well, circa 3500 BC, Sumerians, who are from the south of Mesopotamia, come to dominate the region. They begin the first known cities that evolve into city-states. There are many technological and cultural innovations associated with the Sumerians. We have wheeled vehicles. We have a writing system known as cuneiform. We have the potter's wheel. We have codes of laws, irrigated agriculture, and the beginnings of metallurgy. All right, so now the city of Babylon itself is established around 2800 BC, and it soon becomes a rival to the major city-states of Kish, Ur, Nippur, and Lagash. Now, these city-states are a loosely united confederation that, they're united, but they're independent of each other. Over the course of centuries, one city rules or another. There's a sense of rivalry between the cities and the kingships. Now, circa 2500 BC, the Akkadians, who are from the north, conquer the Sumerians. Well, they develop their own empire. They adopt Sumerian culture, and, they're the first to rule the cities as a unified entity. That's King Sargon. He's an Akkadian king, and he rules all the cities as one political entity. The Akkadians have great art and literature that, is unrivaled by any culture at that time. Now, the next link in the chain are the Amorites. Now, they're from the east of Mesopotamia. They conquer the Akkadians circa 2000 BC. And under the Amorites, Babylon becomes the chief commercial, cultural, and religious center. It becomes the largest city in the world. Now, King Hammurabi, who establishes the famous Code of Laws, was an Amorite king. Now, they rule for about 400 years or so until they're conquered by the Kassites, who are from the west of Mesopotamia. This is circa 1600 BC, who established their own empire. That lasts for roughly 400 years. Then around 1200 BC, we have a series of wars, a long period of, anarchy, confusion, and weakness. Mesopotamian culture goes into a decline until that decline is put in reverse by the Chaldeans. Now, the Chaldeans are from the Persian Gulf region, and they secure the throne and establish their own dynasty and empire, and that lasts for roughly 300 years. That's when the Assyrians enter the picture. The Assyrians are from the city-state of Ashur in the northwestern part of Mesopotamia. Well, they conquer Babylon. They essentially destroy it and rebuild it. They gain control of the trade routes. These guys are mighty, intellectual, ruthless warriors that have some really, really great art and literature. Well, they rule, as I mentioned, from about 900 BC to around 625, when the Chaldeans enter the picture again. They conquer the Assyrians. The Assyrians lose power very quickly and completely. And the Chaldeans, known as the Neo-Babylonian Empire, rule until around 538 BC, when they're conquered by the Persians. Now, the Persians are, of course, conquered by Alexander the Great. The Greeks are in turn conquered by the Romans, who rule the area until Babylon crumbles into dust around 200 AD. Now, Mesopotamia is in fact an amalgamation a mix of many peoples but one culture. The main aspects of Mesopotamian culture, the concept of the city-state, kingship, the pantheon of deities, the many cults and sects, well, these features remain the same, essentially unchanged for 4,000 years. You have the same myths, the same rituals, the same beliefs, but the names of the gods change. All right, the sphere of influence of the Babylonian religion stretches into Asia Minor, Turkey, for example, into the Aegean regions, into Syria, Palestine, Persia. This is a very literate society. We have an awful lot of cuneiform material of a spiritual nature and significance. We have detailed clay, bronze, and copper tablets in 2 languages, in both Sumerian and Akkadian, that give us many, many details about Babylonian religion. For example, we know that they were polytheistic and were involved in fertility cults. We have business receipts from the temple in clay tablet form that give us details about the equipment used for rituals, tell us the type of animals that were being sacrificed. As I mentioned, this is an extremely literate culture. We have epic poems, we have myths, we have hymns, we have prayers, we have incantations, we have ethical treatises, we have proverbs, we have omens, we have rituals. So we have great detail about the religion of the Mesopotamian culture. Now, to the Mesopotamians, there is no clear line of distinction between magic and religion. To these people, the world is a dangerous, mysterious, and terrifying place. Now, magic is far older than what we think of as religion. The control of the unknown is a social and psychological function or need. And these ancient practices, these ancient magical practices, are reinterpreted and incorporated into the trappings of the official state Mesopotamian/Babylonian religion. Now, let me give you some examples. We have many, many amulets that are created by the official state religion. It's a business. We have common amulets that are given to ordinary folks, and we have amulets for the more wealthy that are far more elaborate. Now, these amulets invoke the great gods. They feature incantations or magic spells against demons. For example, we have an amulet for protection against the hot west wind. Well, to the Mesopotamians, the hot west wind is a demon known as Pazuzu. Now, Pazuzu, if that name sounds familiar, well, that's the demon/devil in The Exorcist. If you remember, Pazuzu has a grotesque head carved in the round. He has 4 wings, a curved tail, a bird-like chest, human arms that hold a thunderbolt, and his legs terminate into talons. Well, there are many, many amulets for protection against the dreaded sand dust devil Pazuzu. Now, these people view themselves, humanity, as surrounded by the supernatural, from gods to demons. Both the natural and supernatural forces of the universe control human existence. They are neither good nor evil. They just are. Demons are everywhere. This is a widespread belief. There's a host of demons always ready to cause us trouble. When we sleep, when we're sick, when women are in childbirth, we are surrounded by these entities who, they're irrational, they're evil. They might not even have a shape or a name. For example, Pazuzu, who manifests as a raging sand storm. All right, now, illness is caused by demonic possession. Illness to these people is a type of demonic attack. Well, a state-sanctioned priest/doctor/exorcist who's would diagnose the malady and then invoke the great gods recite the proper incantation, and perform the appropriate ritual. He would diagnose the malady and then perform magic in order to help this patient. Now, over the course of centuries, the names of the gods invoked change, but the practices remain the same. All right, now, these amulets, as I mentioned, divert the demon attack. They are, in fact, a preventive measure. You would carry these amulets or place them in the home in order to prevent demon attack. You would contact a priest/exorcist/doctor after the fact of demon possession. Now, there are many, many demonic species in the Mesopotamian pantheon. There's various forms. There's some good demons as well, protective demons that help humanity and are linked to the gods. They have huge winged bulls and lions, for example, that were placed at entrances of homes and palaces and businesses by the doorway, or some of them were buried under the thresholds in the center of rooms. These are clay figures that are lime-washed and painted black and red. They're known as the mushkushashku. Let me say that again. The mushkushashku. These are essentially composite anamorphic creatures, often with dog bodies, serpent heads, long spiked tails. They're fishmen, birdmen. But these creatures, these entities are benevolent. They are godlings. These figures are a type of super amulet. They feature inscriptions on the back with magical formulas that would render the demon powerless. These were also essentially used to redirect or divert the demon attack. The evil would go into the figure and leap out of the person and go into the figure. Well, as I mentioned, humanity is engulfed by many different forms of demon, ghost, or spirit. These dreaded beings have many, many names. Let me just mention a few. Lamethstu, the dreaded she-demon who would threaten women during childbirth. The Namtaru, a dreaded plague demon who is the messenger of Nagal, the king of the underworld. And the Rabishu, the croucher who hides in doorways and dark corners. And the Galu, or Alu, who are demons born from an unholy union who cluster around the bed of a sick person. They would attempt to snatch your soul upon your death and eat your soul. We also have wraiths. These aren't demons. These are ghosts of the dead, wandering spirits, those who died by violence or infringed on taboo laws, or were neglected by their family during memorial or funerary rites. Well, there's many, many of these wandering spirits who do harm and strike terror into the hearts of humanity. Well, as I mentioned, the priest-exorcist-doctor would recite prayers and rituals, incantations, in association with surgical and medical techniques. He would blend magical oils and beers with herbal measures in a type of sympathetic, symbolic, and religious healing magic. Now, these priest-exorcist doctors would undergo an extensive learning program. There were three main texts, three principal collections: the Sherpu, the Maglu, and the Limnuti, also known as the Atuki. Well, let me explain these volumes one at a time. The Sherpu are rituals to get rid of sins. Sin has offended the gods and opened the doorway for evil. These offenses bring on the illness. For example, moral or ethical misdeeds or breaches of taboo. Then we have the Maglu, which counters the mechanizations of human wizards and witches. You would substitute a wax or wooden image, and the proper incantation would be uttered. The image would be destroyed by fire, As I mentioned, the evil would be substituted. There would be a type of exchange. It would go into the image. It would leap out of the person and go into the image. During the ceremony, the fire gods would be invoked because fire was a great power to counterattack those evil influences. The three gods of fire would be invoked. Let me see if I can remember the names. Nusku, Gibil, and Gira, I believe. Well, as I mentioned, the sins or evil would be transferred to the object or figure, which was then burnt. And then the third text, the Utuki, or Limnuti, this is the exorcism text. You need this text in order to do battle with these evil demons. It features the incantations and rituals that would help you fight these demons. Now, let me give you an example. Preparation of unleavened bread. You would prepare the bread by mixing holy water and blood into the bread. You would recite 3 prayers and incantations during the setting sun while lighting a column of incense. You would place the magic bread into a newly dug hole using an ox horn. This would counterattack the demon. All right, now these ceremonies and rituals could be performed at the temple, the ziggurat, in the open countryside, in a private home or reed hut, or in a sick room. Now remember, these are state officials. They're part of the bureaucracy of the Mesopotamian culture. And these priests / doctors / exorcists make house calls. They carry holy water. They carry portable altars and sacred images and amulets, and they would come to your home and exorcise the demon if needed. Now, let me get a little bit into the ziggurat, the temple complex. Well, every city, every major city in Mesopotamian culture would have a ziggurat, if not many, many temples. The earliest ziggurat was essentially a single level mud brick one-room shrine. These are sunbaked bricks. It's the Akkadians. Remember, they entered the picture around 2500 BC, who are the big monumental builders. They build giant mud brick stepped towers. That's what we know as a ziggurat. They're mud brick stepped towers. They're essentially a complex of buildings that would cover many, many acres. Now, this sacred temple or tower could be anything from 3 to 7 stages. The base would be up to 100 yards square, and the structure would be anything from 50 to 100 yards high. The top of the structure featured a smaller shrine of blue glazed brick. Now, these ziggurats are not observatories. They're not temples. They're not tombs for the kings. They are, in fact, a type of immense altar. They are the throne of God. All right, these ziggurats feature 2 temples. One at the base, the low temple, which are for the folks, for the common people, and they would feature the scribal centers. That's the human level. The high temple is essentially the residence of the deity. Now, the deity would come down from the high temple to the low temple, the human level, during high holy days and festivals. Now, the temple is the ziggurat is in fact an intermediate stage that links earth and heaven. It's a type of stairway or ladder from earth up to heaven and the gods. Now, Babylon, which is the spiritual center of the ancient world, is also very, very religiously tolerant. There are over 100 temples in ancient Babylon. There are many gods, many cults, many sects. And the heart of the city is the grand temple complex known as the Esquilia. This is the great temple of Marduk. That's connected to the Itimen Anki, which is the house of the foundations of earth and heaven. Now, the Tower of Babylon, mentioned in Genesis chapter 11, verse 3 to 5, I believe, is a ziggurat, because the Hebrew word for Babylon is Babel. And in Hebrew, the ziggurat means the gate of God. Well, the Tower of Babel is either modeled after the temple tower of Nana, the moon god, which was actually the biggest temple. It was this huge terrace mountain of blue brick, or it could have been the great temple of Marduk. Both of them are massive and feature 7 stages. Now, the Bible connects the Tower of Babel. This enormous structure is symbolic of the presumptuousness of the ruling of elite who view themselves as God. Well, the Tower of Babel shows all of us that things haven't really changed all that much in these many thousands of years. Now, the gods were viewed as lords of the cities, temples, estates, the world, and the universe. And we, people, humanity, are in fact the tenants of these gods. And we owe the gods rent and services in the form of offerings, prayers, and duty. Well, humanity is, in fact, in the Mesopotamian view, created to relieve the gods of labor. And the gods need human representatives, functionaries, and leaders. Well, this leads to the king, who is viewed as a direct representative to the gods. He's viewed as being semi-divine. He ensures fertility and participates in the rituals. The royal household, the dynasties of these great empires, are in fact divinely ordained and involved in the temple organization. Let's get a little bit into the temple staff. Well, the temple staff is divided into clergy and priests. Not all are given right of entry into the sanctuaries. The Shangu, the priest, carry out ceremonies, offerings, and rituals. There's a special room for this, an inner sanctum known as the Bit Rimki. And, there's many classes of functionaries and specialists. The Pashishu, who is the anointer, and the Ramku, who is the washer. Well, there's also the sword bearer, the Nashpatri, an officer who is involved in the symbolic decapitation of demonic and evil images. He's also responsible for the slaughtering of sacrificial animals or beasts. Well, as you can see, that there's many different levels and stations involved here. Well, there's also the Mari Umani, the sacred craftsmen. These are people who make the statues, they make the idols, they make the images. They're connected to the temple because art is important and sacred to the ancient Mesopotamians. Now, these creators of divine images, the Mari Umani, would carve from a block of wood or stone an idol, representative of the deity. This would be ornamented with precious metals, gold, silver, and jewels. Now, to the Mesopotamians, the idol is not a god itself. It is representative of the gods because the gods are so vast that they fill the universe. And, they can't simply be an idol. All right, so now, when this idol or statue is created, you, of course, would have to recite the proper rituals and incantations so that the presence of the god would enter into this image. Now, let me give you an example. The opening of the mouth ritual. This is when the statue is completed. The person would wash with holy water. He would take the statue. The Mari Umani would take the statue, wash it with holy water to ensure that the deity would take up dwelling inside the idol. This is, in fact, the point of contact. The opening of the mouth is the point of contact between the human and divine. Now, the statue would be taken at night to the riverbank, either the Tigris or Euphrates, and placed on an altar of reeds. In the morning, there would be the sacrifice of a ram. This is the crucial point in the ritual or ceremony, because during the sacrifice of the ram, the statue or idol would become sentient or alive. Now, the priest would symbolically open the eyes of the idol for the god or the goddess by touching them with a twig from the sacred tamarisk tree, which was considered magical wood. The statue or idol is led to the temple and placed on his or her podium or throne after it has been awakened. It's essentially a sacred area visible from the courtyard that would feature long chambers. It was visible from the courtyard because the public must see the idol or the statue. Essentially, there's a series of public access areas where people can come and worship and meditate. Now, these divine images are not confined to the temple. There are several ceremonial processions during the course of the years of festivals. These statues would come forth to the public richly clad, as I mentioned, in fine linens and jewels and gold and silver, and borne in honor on the shoulders of the priests. Any chance movement of the statue during this procession would take on an ominous significance. It would be viewed as an omen. Now, these gods and goddesses would visit each other during the great festivals. For example, Nabu, who is the tutelary god of Porshippa, would visit Marduk, who is the main god, the chief deity of Marduk, 10 miles away. This would happen several times a year. Now, as I mentioned, the divine images are not just regulated to the temple. There are many, many household figures and idols that are part of the economy. They're tied into official state business, and it's a money business. There are many, many workshops / factories under priestly supervision that would create these idols for the mass populace. These priests would come in, they'd use holy water, they'd have portable altars, they'd offer sacrifices, wine libations, incantations with the holy instrument made from tamarisk wood. And this wood would be used to create the idol. It would be cut up in an appropriate manner with a golden axe and a silver saw. And if it was a stone idol, it would be carved with a sacred chisel. These groups of figures made from the blessed wood, the sacred wood or stone, would essentially be purified by the priest and then sold in mass to the public. Now, if it was an idol made of clay, well, the potter's wheel and the clay would receive a ritual cleansing beforehand. It would be made pure with holy water and sacred herbs that are added to the clay. Of course, there's ceremonial rituals and incantations because you're inscribing magical formulas onto the idols. Now, the idol, whether made of wood, stone, or clay, would be sent to the riverbank. This would be hundreds of idols because they're en masse produced. And the statues would be made operational by the priest, who purifies, supervises, and sterilizes, and then sold to the public. All right? Now, once this purification ritual has been done, the statues or idols are now ready to take up their tasks at households and workplaces. And as I mentioned, they're placed in corners, doorways, roofs, air vents to cut off evil and demons at the source. Now, witchcraft, black magic, is a widespread and feared belief in ancient Mesopotamia. There are many, many rituals, incantations, and idols directed at these many evil influences. Now, the law code of Hammurabi actually gives practitioners of witchcraft the death penalty, but legislation in itself was not considered enough to counter attack these demons. Now, these exorcists, the Ashpu and Mashamashu, basically would utilize everything they could grab a hold of in order to counterattack these demons. Now, these Ashu and Mashishu were given regular tasks at the temple, purification rites. As I mentioned, there's also outcalls to homes and workplaces. These priests / doctors are essentially and slash exorcists are essentially knights, psychic centurions who battle evil. Now, they have a lot of help. These Ashpu and Mashu. They have musicians, priests known as Kalu. These are lamentation priests who recite hymns, prayers, incantations. They're very, very important because they help out the Ashpu and the Mashmashu during particularly bad demonic possessions. The Kalu would come in during a particularly bad case and help out the exorcist. Now, these Kalu are also in service at the temple for particular deities. There's a series of musical intervals during the rituals that are mixed up with numerals. Numbers actually play a very important part in ancient Mesopotamian religious rituals. They would play the harp, known as the balagu, and the drums, known as the manzu. Now, there's also a different class of musician priests known as the narus, who are closely associated with the Kalus, but they're actually they're of lesser status. They're the singers. They play the lyre, and they're the choir. They're found in groups in the hundreds, but they're of lesser status than the official musician priests. Now, these priests and all, they are there to interpret omens. Because what is an omen? All right, let's examine what an omen is. Well, an omen is a specific logic tied into relationship between events. An event is succeeded by another. There's a connection, and unusual occurrences are the supposed consequences of these omens. Now, the interpretation of omens is considered a great art or science to the Babylonians. There is virtually unlimited phenomena from which omens can be drawn, and there's special techniques involved. There's liver divination, there's dream interpretation, there's the movements of animals, the flight pattern of birds, for example, and the freaks of nature. And there's also astrology. Now, astrology is an ancient system begun by the Mesopotamians. This is around 3500 BC in Uruk. Now, in the Mesopotamian view of astrology, Earth and man are microcosms of the universe, and celestial bodies exert forces, exhibit personalities, and can influence people and events. Basically, it's as above, so below. All right? Now, what we can do through astrology is learn the will of the gods and basically take advice as to when the best and worst times to start a project. We can learn this from the stars. Now, the Sumerians, as I mentioned, are the first known civilization to map positions in the sky. They developed the astrological divination to a high art. They formalized the zodiac, known as the Circus of Animals, originally 13 constellations, now reduced to 12 because of the ominous connections to the number 13. Well, they would essentially forecast matters of state and war, predict weather and natural disasters. Now, the oldest surviving horoscopes come from the Babylonian region, circa 410 BC. And we have one from Uruk also around 263 BC. Now, these priests and astronomers observed the relationship between the positions of the planets in the stars in order to forecast the will of the gods. Now, diviners are omen interpreters. The divination requires its own experts. Now, the gods direct future events and reveal their intentions. Divination attempts to communicate and learn the will of the gods. The king would consult these diviners during major decisions to reveal the future. Now, these guys are known as the Baru. This is the magical officiant who would examine the entrails of animals, particularly the liver. Before doing this, before undergoing the estipsy, he would perform a ritual purification on himself because he'd have to be in the proper state. He would use cedar resin. He'd place it in his mouth, in his hair, and in his crotch. He would ask the gods to write an answer upon the flesh of an animal. A question would be written on a clay tablet in a yes or no fashion and set before the deity. The god would be asked to write an answer on the internal organs. The animal would be sacrificed, and the organs would be examined. Now, certain abnormalities would have specific meanings. There was a text that would list the meanings of the abnormalities in the different organs, and they also had clay models of internal organs. They were quite well familiar with anatomy, the ancient Mesopotamians. These internal organs, these clay models, would be marked with significant features. Now, this process would be repeated 3 times. And, of course, there would be prayers to the great gods and goddesses. Essentially, the prayers are an expression of utter dependence on these deities. All right, so we see the process of divination. But there's many different types of divination. The animal, examining the entrails of an animal is only one of them. Dreams, dream visions, the interpretation of dreams was also an important part of prophecy to the ancient Mesopotamians. They would consult a priestess of Ishtar or Inanna, who directed the oracles. The oracle centers at Mani and Sargonid were actually run by the priestess women, the Shalu, the asker and solver of dreams. Women had a very high part, a very big role to play in ancient Mesopotamian religion, because the gods or goddesses would speak through the Shalu, and only women were allowed to be involved in dream interpretation, because dream interpretation is linked to the ancient Babylonians with sex and fertility. There's a certain sexual dimension to the Babylonian religion. Now, the Entu, the high priestess, was known as the lady who is a deity, the wife of the god. She would often be the daughter of a king, and she'd have very high social standing. Now, Mesopotamian society is often a warrior culture. It's a series of empires. It's male-dominated, but the highest spiritual authority is the priestess, the woman. They recognize the primacy of the female principle. They understand the power of the pussy. They acknowledge, respect, and admire the power of woman, because the birth canal, the area of desire, is the source of all power. Now, I mentioned the goddess Ishtar. Well, Ishtar is an Akkadian goddess that essentially assimilates the functions and personalities of the Sumerian goddess Inanna. All right. Now, she has vast significance and is a very, very, very powerful deity. She's highly influential. Eventually, Ishtar becomes the only female deity in Babylonia. Ishtar's name is used as a term for goddesses in general. That's how powerful she is. Now, Ishtar's power is reflected in her Akkadian mythology. She drives a team of 7 harnessed lions and sometimes drives 7 evil winds or dust devils. That's how powerful she is. She is venerated in many, many local manifestations as the goddess of war and love and death and life. She is known as the Star of Heaven. The 8-pointed star is her symbol, And her astral form is Venus. The personification of the goddess is the planet Venus. Now, as I mentioned, she's very dualistic. She's the goddess of war and love, death and life. She is the embodiment of sexuality and fertility. She has sweet lips, a beautiful figure, and enjoys sex very much. She rules the menstrual cycle and the ovulation of women. She is also the lady of battle. She carries a bow and a quiver. She has a sword. And she is the source of all power. She bestows power on the kings. She gives the kings the right to rule over her people. All right, so as I mentioned, she's a paradoxical deity. She is reflective of life created by sex and life cut off by the violence of war. And Ishtar slowly emerges from a throng of lesser deities like Anatu and Anati, and Gumshi and Ashara and Arini. She assimilates all these goddesses. Now, this mother holding her massive milk-filled breasts, this virgin warrior, this divine harlot who has lovers from the gods, from the humans, not to mention bestial lovers, who's also a wise one. Well, all these personalities are reflective of the many aspects of womanhood. She's a very formidable figure. All right, let's focus on the divine harlot, because this plays a very important part in Mesopotamian religion. Now, the divine harlot has a special religious sexual role in association with the temples, temple prostitution. All right. There are many women in service to the goddess Ishtar. They're known as Ishtarishtu, I believe. Now, the women who practice temple prostitution are known as the Kadishtu. There's also the Kurgaru and the Ashinmu, who are actually men whose masculinity has been changed by the goddess. They're eunuchs, transvestites, and homosexuals who are neither male nor female. They're often actors and dancers who wear masks during the ritual sex. Ritual sex. All right. Now, these people have, as I mentioned, been changed by the goddess. This involves ritual castration, very similar to the Cybele cult in the Punics. And the Carthaginians also practiced ritual castration. The priests would cut off their own testicles in order to be closer to the goddess. Well, it appears that they got this tradition from the ancient Babylonians. Now, these priestesses, these N2s, and their adepts or acolytes are trained in the arts of pleasure, ecstasy, and delight. Devotional sex is a type of worship to the ancient Mesopotamians, and they're involved in ritual, devotional, sexual activities. Now, there's a place where this happens. It's known as the Bit Shagatha. It's the place where the sex act becomes transformed, and the participants become symbolic of the deities. Now, every woman in Mesopotamian society had to, at one time in her life, enter the Bit Shagatha, dressed in her finest clothes, and wait at the temple until a passing stranger would request her services. Now, these rules would apply to all levels of society, from the richest to the poorest. Now, this is tied in, the Bit Shagatha, the place of union, and this ritual sex act, is tied into the Hieros Gamos, or the sacred marriage. Now, the sacred marriage would take place semi-annually, twice a year. The king, who is the earthly ruler, would, join in a sexual union with the high priestess, who is the spiritual ruler, to ensure the fertility and well-being of the people. This festival this sacred marriage was tied in with the Tree of Life, or the Akitu festival. These are essentially two ancient pre-organized religious festivals that are combined. The Sacred Marriage and the Tree of Life festivals become one under the Assyrians, for example. The event of autumn and the rite of spring are connected into one celebration, essentially the celebration of the pollination of the date palm. As I mentioned, the Sacred Marriage and the Tree of Life festivals, the king and the priestess have roles to play. They participate in the ceremonies, the prayers, the incantations, the rituals, because they represent the god and the goddess. Now, the high priestess, the N2, would essentially spend a lonely vigil in the sacred bridal chamber, waiting for the king to possess her, because the king is the god and has sexual rights over the goddess. Now, the laws of Hammurabi allowed an N2 or priestess and the Natu, the nuns, to marry. They could get, if they could manage to get permission from the goddess, they were allowed to marry, but they weren't allowed to raise children. Their children were either exposed or adopted, because under the laws of Hammurabi, the N2 and the Natu, the priestess and the nuns, must live in the Gagu, a sacred part of the temple. So, sex, fertility, is at the core of ancient Mesopotamian religion. Well, I certainly feel after after investigating Mesopotamian religion that I was certainly born during the wrong time.
Once there was a proud queen, Inanna, who had a son, Dumuzi, that she loved very much. There was a custom at that time for a man of royal blood to be chosen every spring to go underground to the land of death, so that the crops would grow and the people flourish. When spring came and the lots were drawn, Dumuzi was chosen to go. Inanna wept and tried to stop him, but he insisted, feeling he had no choice but to do his duty for the people. So the ceremony took place with music and ritual. Dumuzi was worshipped and then hung from a tree while he died and went to the underworld. Inanna, grieving, closed herself in 7 veils and set off to find the way to that place, to plead with the queen Erishkigal for Dumuzi's return. She was mysteriously drawn towards the entrance, which was guarded by a boatman with the head of a dog. Beyond ran an unearthly river, the color of decay, mud and blood. She begged him to take her across the river, but the gatekeeper only gave way when she took off her first veil and gave it to him. And so she crossed and went on, encountering 6 more terrible boatmen and viscous, oily rivers, dark and terrible. Each time she crossed by giving each of the 6 boatmen one of her 6 veils. Finally, naked, she stood before a great iron gate, and suddenly a menacing shape rose up in front of her and growled.
"You are from the land of the living. You cannot pass into the land of the dead, or you must pay the price."
"I will do what has to be done," said Inanna. The gate swung open, and she could see a great cavern with a throne, surrounded by a throng of moving, whispering spirits, and shapes clothed in dark-colored light. On it was seated Queen Erishkigal, dressed in gold and scarlet, with flowing hair festooned with jewels, but with a thunderous, frowning face from seeing Inanna there. When Inanna looked at her face, She saw a great likeness to her own. Was this her sister, her twin? She dared not say, but said, I have come for the soul and body of Dumuzi. Ereshkigal laughed and asked if she would pay the ultimate ransom, which would be the only way to regain him. And that ransom would be the last thing she could give, the flesh from her bones. Inanna bowed and allowed herself to be hung on a hook in the great cavern beside the throne, until the flesh withered and peeled off, and there was only her skeleton hanging there. The shades carried the pale Dumuzi in their arms to the throne and set him down before Ereshkigal, who said to him, Do you know these bones? Dumuzi recognized the shape of Inanna's fingers, and hot tears gushed out of his eyes, so profound was his grief for what Inanna had done for him and his love for her, that all the company around wept with him. Ereshkigal herself was swept by emotion, and she said to Inanna, You have proved you can go through to the end and were not faint-hearted. You will have Dumuzi back for half the year. But each spring he must die and be reborn again. And so it was. Inanna's flesh went on her bones, and with Dumuzi she went back over the terrible rivers, and each boatman gave her back the veil that she had left there. It was as if, each in their own way, they were reborn, from having overcome fear of facing the monstrous boatman, the fires of experience, and the land of the dead. When winter comes, Dumuzi is gone, but he returns every spring, and his story is endlessly retold as the Fisher King.
And now we're going to focus on the pantheon of gods and goddesses themselves. I have a statue of Inanna with me here. I'm asking for guidance, of course, on this very, very difficult show. All right, let's get into the complex origins of the Sumerian pantheon. I'm going to focus on the Sumerians because their deities are the building block, the foundations for all that were to follow. As I mentioned earlier, the rituals, the responsibilities of the gods, the personalities of the gods remain the same over the course of many thousands of years, but the names change depending on which city-state is running the show at the time. All right, so these people have a common background. Their gods and goddesses are differentiated through ecological reasons. They have the same culture. There's different people, same cultures. Now, these different deities are connected to the different cities and locales. As these smaller communities merged early in Sumerian civilization, as the city-states developed, these divinities come together into a cluster of local and national gods and goddesses. Now, this, of course, happens over the span of centuries. Now, as technological and cultural progression happens, deities arise to take charge of these new, fresh human activities as they develop. For example, when beer is invented, brewing beer, well, there's a god of beer. When brickmaking is invented, there's a god of bricks. When writing is invented, there's a god tied to writing, pottery, a god tied to pottery. So these lesser divinities emerge alongside the principal or main deities. The natural world, technology, art are all part of the divine or supernatural order. Now, we know that the deities are put in different order in different cities because of the boundary stones that have been found. These boundary stones mark the limits of the territories, the lines between the city-states. The stones are embellished with symbols and portrayals of the gods and goddesses, but each city has its own order of deities. There's a rivalry going on here. They're in different order depending on which city you were in. There's a kind of a rivalry going on between the cities and the gods, and each city has its own patron god and goddesses. There's also a variety of origin myths, a number of creation stories that are connected to different points in time, depending on which city-state is running the show. Now, I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to focus on the Sumerian pantheon because it's the oldest, circa 4000 BC, and there's an epic text connected to it, the Anamu Elis. Now, Namu is in fact the first goddess. She exists before time itself. She is the ultimate origin of all things. She is the Great Mother. Now, she's a chthonic creator and birth goddess. She is the living embodiment of the ocean, the watery deep. And as I mentioned, she's the source of all power and life. She is, in fact, the mother of the early gods. Well, Namu creates An, the male sky god and supreme creator, and creates Ki. Now, Ki is the chthonic female deity and supreme creatrix. Well, they have a sexual union, and they create a son known as Enlil. Now, Enlil, which means Lord of the Wind, is the most important god in the Sumerian pantheon. He's the tutelary or patron god of Eru and the big cities in the early Sumerian culture. He's invoked to bless cities and ensure prosperity. He creates other deities. Enlil creates the other gods. He wears a horned headdress and a horned crown. He's known as the Bull of Heaven. He separates heaven and earth, cleaves them in two, and creates the cosmos. He is the source of all order in the cosmos. He's a very remote and shadowy figure who lives on a mountain. He's responsible for all plant life, cattle, farming tools, the skills of civilization. He is not only the Lord of the Wind, but he is the God of wisdom. Now, Enlil is in fact in possession of the sacred tablets, the divine decrees. The Sumerians have the concept of predestination. It's a central concept. It's known as me. Oh, meh. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. It's probably meh. All right. Now, these divine decrees are preordered, predestined, and they determine the development of Mesopotamian institutions, religion, and society. Now, any god, any deity who has possession of these tablets has absolute power and absolute authority. Now, as I mentioned, Enlil, which morphs into Enki under the Akkadians, is also the god of water, and he has the capacity to nourish the earth. The Tigris and Euphrates actually spring from his shoulders. He fills the rivers with sweet, life-giving water. And he also carries a vase that has leaping fish at it. Now, he appoints various other gods to their duties. He runs the day-to-day affairs of the cosmos and organizes the earth into a sense of law and order. Now, he sometimes gets angry. He can be a very vengeful god. He sends storms. He sends floods. He sends famine. He sends pestilence. But he also, paradoxically, lends a helping hand and tilts the balance of fate in the direction of good. Now, his consort is Ninlil, who happens to be the daughter of Nana, the moon god. Now, the moon god is a very, very important god. He's the greatest of the astral deities because he measures time and he's responsible for the calendar. He is the enemy of dark forces. His light shines in the night. His symbol is, in fact, the crescent moon. He's renowned for his wisdom. He gives advice to the other gods. Okay, so when Enlil needs advice, he goes to Nana, the moon god. Now, he travels across the sky in a wagon, and he's known as the brilliant young bull. Now, his buddy is Utu, the sun god, whose daily course across the heavens dispels all darkness. And the sun god Utu sees all the works of humanity. He knows all of our secrets. We can hide nothing from Utu, the sun god. And his symbol is the four-pointed star with sun rays emanating out from the star. Now, I want to get into the goddess Inanna, the Sharat Shameh, the queen of heaven, who is the goddess of fertility and war. Well, she is, in fact, the paramount goddess to the Sumerians. Now, she is the daughter of Nana, the moon god. She wears a horned headdress, has wings. There's a weapons case on her shoulder. Remember, she's the goddess of fertility and war. She is associated with lions or lion cubs, and she resides on top of a mountain. Her symbol is a bundle of reeds tied in three places, and a star on a rose. Now, she is tied in with the sacred tree of life, also known as the Halipupu tree. She was the original goddess of the date palm. She's also the goddess of the natural world. She's the goddess of wool, meat, grain. She's the goddess of lightning, tears, and rejoicing. She's also a rain goddess, and she's connected to the morning and evening stars. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Inanna morphs into Ishtar under the Akkadians. Now, she's connected to the stars, the morning star, which is the Dilba. When you see the morning star, Inanna is hunting. She's wearing her armor, she's riding a chariot, and she's hunting whatever she can see, human or animal. When she is personified as the evening star, the Zib, she's being served by the temple prostitutes. Now, these two images combined, you have the alternative warlike and the lustful energies. Well, these combine into a very, very, very threatening, if not very turn-on-ish sexuality. All right, now her sister is Ereshkigal, which means the great below. Ereshkigal is the chthonic underworld goddess. She is, in fact, the queen of the underworld, the lady of the great place. She's the dark alter ego, or elder sibling to Inanna. In early text, Ereshkigal is a sky goddess who is abducted by the demon Ker and eventually becomes the queen of the underworld. Now, her palace is known as Kanzer, and she has two attendants. Namtar, who is representative of fate or destiny. Namtar is a go-between, a servant for the goddess, Ereshkigal, and he brings death to humanity, but always at the appropriate hour. He ensures that you are not taken before your number is up. And she has a second attendant known as Neti. He's the chief gatekeeper of the underworld. The underworld actually has 7 gates. Now, her consort is Nergal. He's king of the underworld. He's the god of war and the god of sudden death. He's a bearded figure who emerges from the ground carrying a double-edged mace/scimitar that is embellished with lion heads. He's a very powerful and much-feared god. He's also the god of pestilence. But Nergal becomes king of the underworld via seduction /sex. He is, in fact, under a type of sexual enslavement by Ereshkigal. Ereshkigal's charms are very difficult to resist. She's very darkly beautiful. She has very pale skin, raven-haired. She's red-lipped and full-breasted. And Nergal cannot resist her charms, and he's under a type of sexual enslavement. He actually doesn't leave the queen's bedchamber for weeks at a time. They have a lot of sex in the underworld. Leadership of the underworld is left to the female. The queen really rules the dark place. Now, there are many, many, many minor gods connected to every aspect of life. everything, every part of our lives, according to a Mesopotamian view, is under control by one deity or another. There's so many gods, I could never mention them. So basically, I'm just going to tell you this. An individual person, you or I, if we were in that time, would have a personal god, a type of guardian deity, to look after him or her. Now, this personal god would be a minor deity who makes supplications to the greater gods on behalf of the person in his or her care. Remember, the names of the gods change or morph over the course of centuries, depending on who's in charge. For example, Enlil becomes Enki, who becomes who becomes Marduk, who becomes Ashur. They all have the same functions, same personalities, same symbols, just different names. So these minor deities act as kind of a go-between between humanity and the greater gods. All right? Now, let me get into the great god of Babylon, Marduk, the chief deity of the city of Babylon and of Babylonia. Now, Marduk is an amalgamation of various gods. Marduk is a deliberate assimilation of many other gods into this one great god. It's a slow movement towards monotheism. Marduk is a minor god who rises to prominence circa 2000 BC under the Akkadians. He takes over many of the functions, titles, and responsibilities of many other deities. The old myths are reworked and revamped for Marduk. Now, Marduk serves as as a champion of the gods in a cosmic battle. He's a great hero. He's the great hero of Babylonian creation myth. Now, this creation myth is a magical liturgical poem that is retold during the Aiku festival, for example. Now, the visible manifestation of Marduk is the planet Jupiter. Now, you have, in this creation myth, you have the old gods versus the new gods. You have a civil war amongst the deities, led by Tiamat, a very ancient, evil reptilian, powerful female deity that has managed to grab a hold of the tablets. Remember, she has the me or meh. She has the power of destiny. She assembles a demon army led by her son Kingu. Various gods try to stop her. They can't subdue her. She's very strong. She's very powerful. Remember, she has the tablets of destiny, and she's winning the war. Well, Marduk offers to destroy the primeval monster, Tiamat, but there's going to be a fee for his services. If he manages to subdue this reptilian deity, he expects to be made king of the gods. Well, all the other gods agree. Well, he manages to kill Tiamat. He divides her body into half earth, half sky, and then mixes the blood from her dead general/son Kingu with mud and creates humanity. This makes Marduk the Lord par excellence, the Bell, and he takes preeminence in the pantheon. Now, Tiamat, the female dragon-like monster, must be overcome, must be destroyed before order can be created in the universe. And as I mentioned, this myth is retold. It's potent. It's magical. It's retold at the Akitu festival, which is actually a New Year festival. All right, now let me get a little bit into Gilgamesh. This mixture of legend, myth, and history that's found on 12 tablets in the city of Nineveh in 1872. For those of you who don't know, Gilgamesh was an actual person. He's in the list of kings. He's the 5th king of Uruk. Didn't know that Gilgamesh was a real guy, huh? Okay. Well, there's 5 known stories about Gilgamesh and a 6th fragment. These stories are known as the Bull of Heaven, the Aga of Kish, the Land of the Living, the Netherworld, the death of Gilgamesh and the Halapupu tree. That's the fragmentary one. We don't have the whole story on that one. Well, these copies, this Epic of Gilgamesh, are discovered all over the ancient world, in Palestine, in Syria, in Greece, in Turkey, in India, over the course of many, many, many centuries. This is great literature. It is filled with dramatic power, exquisite observations on human life, the search for answers, the search for reasons, the goals of human existence. There's a sense, there's a broad sweep. There's a sense of artistic unity in design in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, the story itself is a revolt against death that is revised, repeated, and renewed, and worked into an epic over the course of centuries. From a span of about 3,000 years, from about 3,500 BC to about 500 BC, the Epic of Gilgamesh is retold and renewed and preserved by one ruling elite after another. Now, the fullest version that we have is an Akkadian text that's found in the vast library of King Ashurbanipal, which is the 13th century BC. According to this fullest version, Gilgamesh is in fact 1/3 god and 2/3 man. But he's not a good ruler. He oppresses his subjects, and his people pray for a counterpart, someone to keep him in check. They're asking the gods for deliverance. Well, the gods create Enkidu, a noble savage type who's covered with hair and lives with the beasts. Well, Enkidu loses his special nature with the natural world when he loses his virginity from a prostitute. I'm not kidding, folks. He becomes more human-like through sex. Now, Gilgamesh and Enkidu engage in combat. This combat is essentially a draw, and they become very, very close friends, some say lovers. There's a series of adventures with many heroic exploits. For example, they kill the dreaded demon Humbaba. Well, Ishtar, impressed by Gilgamesh, invites the king to be her consort. Well, Gilgamesh scornfully refuses the advances of Ishtar, and Ishtar becomes enraged, and she sends a dreaded demon to slay them, to slay Gilgamesh and his buddy Enkidu. Well, they end up slaying the dreaded demon, and Ishtar becomes even more enraged, and she goes to a heavenly council, and the gods decide that Enkidu must die for slaying the demon. A price must be paid. Enkidu's death is symbolic of the realities of death. We can't escape this fate. And Gilgamesh goes on a quest to do exactly that. After Enkidu's death, he tries to find the secrets of immortality and eternal life. He crosses the waters of death, and he visits on Utupistum, the one man who has gained everlasting life. He actually survives the Great Flood. He tells Gilgamesh the secret of his longevity. Well, it appears that there's a plant, a life-giving plant, at the bottom of the ocean. And Gilgamesh goes in search of this plant with Utna's boatman and recovers the plant. But before he can actually use it, this plant of eternal life, a snake steals it away from him, and the snake uses it for himself. This gives the snake the gift of rejuvenation. That's why the skin-shedding snake is a sign of eternal life and reincarnation to the ancient Mesopotamians. So Gilgamesh is changed by his experiences. He accepts the fact of his inevitable or eventual death, and he's a changed man. There's a lot of spiritual growth for Gilgamesh, and he returns to his city taking the boatman on a tour of Erech, the city Erech. And as I mentioned, he's now a wise ruler. And basically the lesson of Gilgamesh is that the hope for immortality is foolish and vain. Now, as I mentioned, there's a flood in Gilgamesh that is directly linked to the biblical deluge. There's a building of a boat, a perfect cube. All of humanity is destroyed except for one family. The waters subside. He sends out a dove, a swallow, a raven. And when he finds that the earth is now dry again, he offers a sacrifice on the top of a mountain. The gods cluster around because they're enjoying the sweet smells of the smoke. So this ancient Mesopotamian myth of a flood is transmitted or transmuted into the Bible. All right, so the Mesopotamia has left all of us a vast legacy of ideas and knowledge. The science of astronomy, the astronomical concepts, the elements in our calendar, medicinal plants, herbs, chemical processes, the codes of law and commerce, and inventions galore. The cradle of civilization is the correct term. Mesopotamia creates the building blocks, the foundations for our civilization. Let's just take a moment to think about all the religious motifs and concepts and symbols that can be tied directly to the ancient Mesopotamians. Well, the crescent moon, for example, the intertwined serpents, for example, these date back to the earliest examples of Mesopotamian art, circa 4000 BC. The cross is an Akkadian symbol. The Maltese cross does not originate in Malta. It originates in Babylon, circa 2900 BC. The shield of David, the sacred Hebrew star, is actually an old Assyrian cylinder seal, circa 1800 BC. The tree of life. Well, the tree of life continues throughout Mesopotamian history. It's prominent in pedimentary sculptures, friezes, and it's a direct link to the book of Genesis. There's also links to Christian theology and Oriental art. Well, this earliest known Sumerian symbol dates to at least 4000 BC. Well, let's examine the Bible. Mesopotamia, Babylonia. Well, there's so many elements of it in the Bible, from Abraham, who's born in Ur, who's a Mesopotamian himself, to the Jews' exile in Babylon. We have the flood, as I mentioned in the Gilgamesh epic. We have a direct link to Babylon in the Tower of Babel. There are numerous, too many to mention, references to magic, witchcraft, demonic possession in the Bible. We have concepts of coronation, anointing with oil. These are all found in the ancient Hebrew text and the New Testament. In fact, 2 entire books of the Bible, the Nahum and the Song of Songs, are loaded with Mesopotamian religious ideas. Fertility cults, the New Year's festival, well, they're prominent in these 2 books from the Bible. But the greatest legacy of all that the Mesopotamians have left us is the gift of literacy. Writing, reading, literature, thought itself can be directly traced to these ancient peoples. What an amazing, amazing journey for us and for the Mesopotamian people. We're going to close the show. God Rock Radio was written, produced, and directed by me, Jack Garcia. Honorary producer and creative consultant, Reverend Hal Shaw. God Rock Radio is a Stone Idol production. To listen to, stream any of our past episodes, please go to our website, www.godrockradio.com. To download any of our previous past programs, simply go to archive.org. And don't forget our entertainment channel on the YouTube network. Simply go to Jack the Agnostic Garcia or Chabita Macon. We now have 2 channels, so please check them out. And don't forget our page on Facebook.